So if I can believe my phone, I believe the appointed hour has arrived. So I will call the November 4th meeting of the Hastings Planning Commission to order. If you'll please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Bolthouse. Here. Darling. Here. Foster. Like. Here. Mattson. Here. McLean. Moyer-Kale. Here. Tassava. Here. And Hatfield here. So we do have a quorum present. You've received a draft agenda. Are there any requested changes to that?
Mr. Chair, I'd move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Support.
We have a motion and support. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Likewise, you've received a copy of the minutes of the October 7th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
We have a motion. Do we have support?
Support.
Motion and support. Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Information items, we have none, so we have two public hearings tonight. We'll move into the first of those, which is a public hearing to review and consider a conditional rezoning request from GSDQ Properties, LLC, for property located at 1220 West State Street, from the B2 General Business District to the D2 Industrial District. Dan, you want to introduce that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we received a application for a conditional rezoning for 1220 West State Street from GSDQ LLC. Hopefully I got those initials right, David. This is for a property on West State Street. It formerly housed the Habitat for Humanity Restore. In prior use was Viatech, aka Hastings Reinforced Plastics, back 30, 40, 50 years ago. So the site was did have an industrial use at one time, up until most recently when Spectrum Health, Pennock Hospital, Corwell Health acquired the property. So GSDQ does have an ownership interest and offer pending on the property to reuse the property again in somewhat of an industrial manner. They have provided, as part of the application requirements, a set of conditions that they would be willing to adhere to pending the outcome of the public hearing and the discussion by the Planning Commission. So that's the reason for the public hearing. Rebecca Harvey did complete a staff report, and she could report that on that right now.
Okay. Rebecca?
So what might be helpful for those of you who perhaps are not familiar with the conditional rezoning option that is available in Michigan, I would just like to maybe highlight a few things about the nature of such a request. As you know, in Michigan, an applicant can make application to you for with a request to rezone property, and you consider that request, and you're guided by the standards in your ordinance. But the essence or the foundation of considering a traditional rezoning request is that you take a look at the requested district, and you're essentially required to consider all of the use options available in that district as you apply your criteria. Because an applicant is not, it really has nothing to do with what they're proposing to use the property for. Once you rezone a piece of property, then the applicant or the owner of that property is free to use that property for any of the purposes that are allowed in the district you just rezoned it to. So because they're not bound to a particular use when they make that request, then as you apply your criteria, you understand that, and you have to sort of answer all of your questions saying, well, we have to take a look at the requested district, in this case D2, and assume that any of those uses allowed in that district are an option for the district. Well, as you can imagine, under those parameters, it often affects how you feel about a requested district as it relates to meeting the criteria in terms of, does the master plan support it? What would be the impact on adjacent properties? What is the impact on the infrastructure? The kind of criteria you apply. Obviously, if you're in answering those questions, if you have to assume that any of the uses allowed in that district are options, it changes what your findings are in applying those criteria. So some years ago, the Zoning Enabling Act in Michigan was modified and allowed local communities to consider applications for conditional rezonings. Before that time, it was just as I said, it was a traditional rezoning option for you. Under a conditional rezoning, it authorizes an applicant the opportunity to come to the Planning Commission and say, here's the request I would like, the rezoning, and I am willing to offer these conditions on that request. Now, the parameters for that are that a Planning Commission cannot request such a condition, nor can you require such conditions. But if you have an applicant coming to you and saying, either I already know or I suspect what your concerns are going to be, and so to alleviate those concerns, I am going to offer these conditions. You, as a Planning Commission, are not only free to accept that offer of conditions, but you are then free to go through your criteria and make your findings based entirely on those conditions. And as you can imagine, depending on what that offer of conditions is, it can really change how you might find on your criteria. So those offer of conditions can range. They can range from limiting it to a particular use in the requested district to sort of site design things. The only things that they can't do is you can't offer to do something in the district that isn't authorized in the district. That's the only thing, but most applicants are not offering that. In addition to that, no matter what the offer of conditions are, it does not supersede any kind of development review process you have in effect. So if an applicant offers you conditions on use and some site design conditions, that's fine, and then you move forward and rezone it accordingly, they still are required to go through the site plan review or special use process. It doesn't remove that. Even those conditions might in fact be things you consider during that process. But that's a really important point. In this particular case, so that's sort of the generic what a conditional rezoning is, but that's really important, and the reason I stress that is not necessarily you as the City of Hastings Planning Commission, but planning commissions in general around Michigan. It's a relatively new option available to you, like maybe in the last 10 to 15 years. And not all communities are either familiar or deal with it frequently. So I wanted to make sure that for those of you who had not heard of it or had never been, sort of had it in front of you, that you understand the very, very important distinctions between it and the latitude. I mean, it really is a design benefit to both the applicant and to the Planning Commission when you have an applicant willing to offer that. Now, moving to the application in hand, this particular applicant has, they're looking at the property that's in the B2. It's a general commercial district. They're asking for the D2, which is not at all a general commercial district, right? It is an industrial district and has different standards that apply. However, In this case, what the applicant is offering to condition this rezoning on is, number one, limiting it to one particular use that they've outlined in their offer of conditions. It's both in the application and in the staff report. So if you were to look at the D2 district in your zoning ordinance, you would see that there's a list of industrial uses allowed. They've selected one of those out of there, and they've said, we are willing to say that the only thing we want to do on that property is this use, and that's what we're willing to limit that on. What that means to you is that if you were so inclined to recommend approval, and the City Commission approves that, and it becomes conditionally rezoned to D2, then the only use option available to them is that use. They can't go through all of those other D2 uses like they would be able to in an unconditional rezoning. They would be bound by the one use condition they've offered. However, this applicant has also offered two other conditions, that actually are worth mentioning as well, only because they very much will have an impact on how you apply the criteria. Number one, they have offered as a condition the willingness to use the existing building and to not expand that building. That's one. I said it in two pieces, but that's one condition. So that's a big deal because, a lot of times property owners go in and a planning commission might say, well, we think that's appropriate for this building, but if that doesn't mean, unless they condition it, that they can't go in and remove the building and build new, and maybe that's one of your concerns about rezoning it. So you have this applicant saying, no, we're interested in using the same building and not expanding it. So they're telling you exactly, and that really allows you to focus in on these criteria and say, what do we think about that? Because they're being very specific in their proposal. And then lastly, that they're willing to offer a limitation of no outdoor storage. All right? So right there, normally without that offer of conditions, those might all be concerns you would have if you were looking strictly at going from a B2 to a D2. You'd say, oh my gosh, here are all these industrial use options. They can have unlimited outdoor storage. They can do this, they can do that, and we fear that might not be compatible with the surrounding commercial area. They're allowing you to really focus in and say, oh no, we know it's going to be this use, this building, and no outdoor storage, so now what do we think about it? So you will note that the four criteria that you have, that you look at the lens through which you review rezonings, I have made sure and provided review comments to you and findings that are reliant upon those conditions, which is what you are in a position of doing. So, and you can see as you go through those that being able to do that really allows you to make some findings you might not otherwise be able to make. Did you have any questions about that very exciting thing in front of you? All right, thank you.
Well explained, thank you. Any questions for Rebecca? Dan?
Just one point of reference, and Rebecca kind of alluded to that. On the screen, there's a draft ordinance. Because depending upon the outcome of your deliberation and decision, if you were to approve this, since it is a conditional rezoning and it is a rezoning, which would be a change to the text of the ordinance, this would be subject to City Council's review and approval through a first and second reading. So just as a reminder, if a motion was made to approve the conditional rezoning, to also include the fact that it would be referred or recommended to City Council for their review and approval.
Okay. At this time, if there are no other questions, I'm going to open it up for public comment, and then we'll hear from the applicant. So anyone wishing to comment on this application, please step to the podium, give us your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to share your thoughts with us. Going once, going twice. going 3 times. So, would you care to make any comments on behalf of the applicant?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Planning Commissioners. It's nice to be here with you tonight. My name is David Calden. I'm with Varnum LLP. We're counsel for FlexFab and its real estate holding company for purposes of this application, GDSQ Property LLC, which is a holding company for this property. With me tonight is Keith Foster of FlexFab, who's overseeing this project for FlexFab, and we sent you a letter that's in your packet. I won't go through that in too much detail. Mr. King and Ms. Harvey did a great job of explaining the background, a lot of the background here, and I want to also thank them for being so accessible and responsive and professional in response to our questions to them. We really appreciated that. I'll just take 1 or 2 minutes to summarize a couple quick points in the letter, which is that FlexFab via GSDQ has signed a purchase agreement for the property. Again, it's at 1220 West State Street, seeking a conditional rezone of that property to D2 as was explained, and we're going to offer conditions to limit the use of the property if it's rezoned, narrowly tailor those permitted uses as were explained to ensure that only very limited uses are permitted. FlexFab currently leases the back half of that building from Corwell. It uses it for operations and logistic purposes, and in that capacity it uses some light machinery in the building, as does Corwell, such as forklifts and high-lows and things of that nature. And FlexFab would like to use the property for a light manufacturing use that would include injection molding or custom machining of tools used in its business elsewhere, and so hence the request to rezone to D2. Importantly, this proposed use will not materially increase noise or vibration or odor or traffic beyond either the current use of the building or what is typical for a commercial district or the adjacent properties. The conditional rezone to D2, we believe, also complies with the master plan, as we cite throughout our letter, for a variety of reasons, including that the master plan calls for zoning changes that promote the reuse of existing commercial and industrial buildings to accommodate business with low impact, which we believe this clearly does. I won't put words in staff's mouth. They did a great job of explaining their position, but we think that their report also supports the conditional rezone by concluding that it's compatible with the land use in the surrounding area, that it won't significantly impact public services or facilities, that it's consistent with the policies and uses proposed in the master plan, and that, again, with the conditions that were described, will limit the uses to be consistent with surrounding uses and really constrain operations permitted on the property to be consistent with the character of the business corridor there. And then as to the conditions that were described, again, the only use, the manufacturing, fabrication, and assembly operations, that would include ancillary office or storage uses in the building, but FlexFab would not expand or increase the footprint. There would be no outdoor storage permitted. And we would just also add the condition that this rezone will not be effective until the closing occurs on the purchase of this property from the current owner, Corwell. So in conclusion, we would respectfully request that you recommend this conditional rezone to the City Council. Again, we believe it's supported by the proposed conditions, the goals in the city's master plan, which we think this meets, and the fact that the proposed use won't increase the noise, vibration, odor, or traffic beyond the current or typical commercial business uses in the area, as well as the staff's review and report. We appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much again for listening to us. Keith and I will be available if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keith, anything you wanted to say before we open it up to questions from the Commission?
No, just thanks for allowing us to be here, present our case, and your consideration of our request.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll open the floor to questions.
I think it was talked about and explained pretty well. I don't really have any questions.
Okay. Bill?
No.
Nicole?
No, I don't think I have any questions. The existing footprint is already in compliance as far as like green space and parking and all of that, so there's no concerns with that. I don't have any questions.
I actually don't know that. However, if that would not be relevant.
Okay.
Maybe relevant's not a good choice of words. As it relates to the rezoning criteria, the status of a particular built environment on a site is not really something, I think it's relevant in the sense that, you wouldn't do something that you know the property is not big enough to accommodate. So I mean, I think that makes sense. But I wouldn't want the Planning Commission to base a decision on a finding that everything on the site is conforming, because I don't know that.
Okay.
And I can answer a little bit more specifically. I did review setbacks, lot coverage. The current structure does conform to those. I also looked at the parking requirements, and as it appears now, as it exists, the parking requirements on site would also be met. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we've also, in our purchase agreement, discussed with Corwell, if we don't have quite enough parking, which I think in hindsight, we probably have enough parking, but we would work with them to establish a parking agreement, because behind the 2230 site, they have plenty of parking. We're also working, we've got options for, they access their pennant for Corwell's maintenance garage is there at 2230, so we're going to be entering into probably some easements with them for that continued access and again, our access.
Okay.
Right now, the driveway on 2220 side is a little tight, and it only goes out one way eastbound. So we will likely be petitioning MDOT to consider a curb cut change so that we can not have to use Corwell's access, but be able to make a eastbound turn into the property. They may restrict us to one-way exit, but we'll work with them on that to meet the needs or concerns there.
Thank you. Levi?
No questions.
No question.
Scott? Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve their request from a B2 to a D, is that D2? Is that what we're going for? And approve their conditional and forward to sign to the city council.
Support. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very well laid out and presented, so thank you. All right, our second public hearing tonight is to review and consider final site plan approval and amendment to the Woodlawn Meadows planned unit development from Woodlawn Meadows Retirement Village for a property located at 1813 North East Street for the development and construction of 32 detached site condominiums. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, as the chair stated, there will be a public hearing tonight to consider really two things. One is final site plan approval for the applicant's request for the property located at 1813 Northeast Street. And the second is a modification of the existing planned unit development, which is Woodlawn Meadows Planned Unit Development, PUD. Current PUD, and Rebecca will report on this in her staff report, was approved approximately 20 years ago with some a little bit more denser unit approval back 20 years ago. The current request is a reduction in that density requirement. The site plan does include 32 detached single-family condo units in 32 different parcels. It includes the extension of Northeast Street, which is currently a private road from the northern truncation of the city's street, and their plan is to continue that as a private road as per their site plan in somewhat of a cul-de-sac arrangement. So again, kind of a two-phased final site plan approval, site condo aspect for the project, and then also a modification of the PUD, which again, per our zoning ordinance, planning unit developments are looked at as a singular or separate zoning district within the city. So depending upon your analysis and consideration, the ordinance would need to be drafted and approved and recommended to City Council. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rebecca for contents of her staff report.
Yes. So, as Dan mentioned, you have basically two actions before you this evening. One is going to be your public hearing and action or recommendation on the final PUD plan, and then on the preliminary site condo plan. As you recall, you conducted your preliminary plan review last month. You essentially indicated to the applicant that you found the design to be acceptable, and that you had a couple of questions that you wanted them to clarify in their final plan. And so that is what they are back here before, and this is your final action on this before you send it up to council. So I would like to direct your attention to a couple of things. First, with respect to your final development plan review on the PUD, you'll notice from the report that for the most part, the proposal complies with all of the standards, all of your PUD standards. The only section I would bring to your attention is the section titled Applicable Regulations. This was raised last month in the preliminary review, so it's not new, but it does require your specific action. So you actually have the standards of the R1 district apply in terms of lot width and lot size, and that's what determines the density. So they meet your density standards, but they are proposing lot widths and lot sizes, at least on some of them, that are going to be less than the required. Now, under the PUD planning option, you actually have the opportunity or the option of waiving those standards. So the applicant is asking that you do so. So my comment to you as a planning commission is that obviously, number one, that is going to be a point of discussion for you. Do you find the lot sizes where they do not comply, do you find them acceptable? And then number two, if you do find them acceptable, you will have to make specific note of that. That will have to be specifically part of your action, because as Dan mentioned, this is more, when you act on a PUD, you're not just granting development plan review, you're actually doing it by zoning, and so it creates all of your conditions as part of the district. And you will want to make sure that you act on that so that they know that they have authorized an approval for these lot sizes and lot widths that do not comply. I would also note, and this is in bold on the last bullet on the lot size, lot width, the plan erroneously references the standards of the R2 district, And they should be corrected to reference the R1 district. That is what applies, and it's a minor thing, but the plan should be correct in that respect. The second highlight under the same section has to do with, specifically with setbacks. So essentially the way your PUD standards reads is that the development of the individual sites are going to be subject to all of your R1 district standards, and you're not really approving those at this time because those are just going to be checked when they come in for building permits to build on each site, with the exception of setbacks. And I think this is important because I think it's the setbacks that might lead you to believe or to find the lot size reductions and lot width reductions acceptable if you also are feeling that you're reducing the setback standards. I mean, obviously there's a relationship there. So to have a smaller lot and larger setbacks or setbacks akin to the district, you know, it's obviously going to reduce the buildable area of each site. So the applicant, again, because essentially the lot sizes they're working with are akin to the R2 district. That's what some of them they're asking for. They're also asking for setbacks that are related to the R2 district. In that the R1 district applies, the setbacks are not great enough. So the applicant is asking for reduced setbacks. I think it would be appropriate to make a finding on that at this time too, since I think they're related to the lot size. So essentially, when you render an opinion on this PUD plan, your opinion should include your finding as to whether or not you support a waiver of the lot size and lot width standards of the R1 district, such to allow lots as small as 7,000 square feet and the widths that are proposed, 50 to 60 feet, and that you also are finding reduced setbacks from the R1 district to as small as 25 for the front, 25 for the rear, and 15 and 6 for the side, akin to the R1, that you're finding those acceptable. That should, just like with the lot size and lot width, should be a specific part of your action and approval. And again, the R1 district standards should be reflected on the site plan, not the R2. All of the other regulations have been met, and so there is no need for any special action besides that. The rest of the standards in the report as it relates to the PUD are more discretionary standards where you're making findings, and so I have provided you with conclusions in that respect. So with the exception of those two items I noted, the proposal is in fact consistent and in compliance with your PUD standards. On the last page, as it relates to the site condominium, this is actually the same findings that you had that were in front of you last month. But I'm going to make special note of them because, the reason I do that is because unlike the PUD where you saw the preliminary and the final, and so it lets you be more specific, on the site condo, you only see the preliminary. So you want to be very specific to City Commission as it relates to your recommendation, because all you're doing on a site condo is essentially saying, yeah, we find the layout acceptable as it relates to the lots and the road. But there are some nuances to that, and it's really kind of your job to sort of flag those for the City Commission so that when they act, they know to do this. So I would suggest that any recommendation to approve the site condo would specifically indicate those 4 bullets, that the private road is subject to the standards for city public street construction. Same with utilities and stormwater, that they're subject to DPW review and approval. That they obviously have to submit a master deed that speaks to certain elements, and I've put those in this writing. And then lastly, that any approval that you've made on your PUD also apply to the site condo. And essentially what you're doing there is you're making these recommendations to the City Commission so that when the City Commission actually acts, when they have these things in front of them, the master deed and these approvals, that they can be confident that they're following your recommendations.
So I have a question for Travis. So Becky's indicated that one of the things to specifically call out in the approval is that the road complies with city public street construction. And in your report, you've indicated a couple of items related to that. Is that directly the city standard that they need to follow, or is that some other recommendation?
That's the city standard.
Okay.
36 feet.
Okay. And has the applicant been provided this information? I know it came kind of late in the week.
I'm not sure if it was sent to Dan, or Dan sent it to the applicant, I'm not sure.
Yes, okay, great. I just wanted to make sure we came full circle on that.
Sure. Were you copy on that?
I saw it in the packet.
Okay. I did provide it to Mr. Chandler.
Okay. Thank you.
And Travis, that same thing goes for your other bullet points on your report.
Yes. Yeah, the drainage easement should be 20 feet wide. The drainage easement should be labeled private, since there's no way for us to do any maintenance, or have access to maintain the easements. Yeah, the other stuff is stormwater management, and grading issues. Our standards shows 13A and 13 for top and base. Of course, that's an old standard, and any equipment would be fine.
Okay, so any approval simply needs to reflect those items and your,
Yeah.
okay. All right, any questions for Dan, Rebecca, or Travis?
I got a question for Travis. You're saying the street has to be 36 feet wide. What is the existing street there now?
There's no street right there. Oh, you mean
It's
the...
a private street now.
private street.
Right.
It's only 20. Yeah, I think they matched what the existing private road is. That's what they're matching.
So what you want, though, is you want them to go from a narrow street to a wider street back in there? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's the city standard.
Right.
Question
Okay.
of the applicant.
I was going to open it up for public comment, and then
Okay.
we'll get to questions for the applicant and their
All right.
response to anything that they've heard. So, just a follow-up, Travis. We require that all private roads meet these standards?
The road committee, or the planning commission can, there's a clause in that ordinance that says it could be 28 feet face-to-face, 28 feet wide, if the planning commission allows it.
Okay, well, what's the impact on the city of allowing a 28-foot as opposed to a 36-foot?
Really, there's no impact for the north-south. There's no impact, really. I would say originally the original PUD had a lot more commercial or senior residential. So I would say the roads really were only needed to go from the buildings to the public street. But now that there's going to be residential houses there, I think wider roads would be better for the people that are living for traffic, so that it's not too congested in that area.
In some of our core neighborhoods, what's our typical street width?
It's that, or wider. We have very wide roads in the city of Hastings. But yeah, that's typical.
I'm thinking more of a neighborhood street as opposed to a, I'm not talking Green or Clinton or...
Yeah, our local streets, we have room to park at least on one side and still have two-way travel.
And a 28 does not?
No. If people parked on the side of the street, it'd be a one-way road, pretty much.
Okay.
I can't say one way or another, but I think the fire chief might have some input on, especially because it's two dead
Yeah,
ends.
that was the next
Just turning
question.
the fire
Right.
truck around, I'm not sure. I typically favor more narrow streets in general, but it's got to be safe.
Okay. All right, are we set to open the public hearing? All right, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to comment on this, please step to the podium, give us your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to share your thoughts with us. Then we'll hear from our applicant.
I wasn't really prepared to speak, but I guess I have to. I'm Ann Eckert, and I live at 333 East North Street in the condos there. I don't know if you received my letter that I wrote and brought to City Hall.
I do have that.
Okay. So those...
You could either read that, or I'm prepared to read that.
Oh, all right.
To introduce it in the public record, search.
Can I ask the questions
Sure.
without reading the...
Sure, let me bring that up.
Okay. I had the cataract surgery, so now I know. And you'll do fine.
I'm sure I will.
Yeah. Basically, I live in the second building in from East Street. And there are some things, and I just stop me if I'm not in the right place at the right time. But I have concerns about these condos. First of all, is the amount of traffic. With 32 units, there's the possibility of 2 cars per unit. That's a lot of traffic. I think some of the patterns might have to be changed, and if there's no other outlet other than East Street, and then you've got older people driving up into Woodlawn Meadows, and I have seen some, and I'm no spring chicken, but I've seen some terrible, terrible close calls already. The capacity for sewer, water, and fire services. The wildlife in the area, I know that's not a big deal for developers or any of those folks, but it is for us. We already have poor street conditions on North Street due to the construction that went on North Street. They didn't bring the trucks in from Woodlawn, Woodlawn. And on East Street, they brought them in from North Street. So we had all that construction, and they're not in good shape. The drainage into the pond concerns me, and then I have questions, and they won't be answered tonight, but is this truly a project of Woodlawn Meadows? Would the developer consider fewer units than 32? Will there be a variation in styles? Will they have basements? Will the woods be taken down? Will there be green space? Are there are they 1 or 2 levels above ground? Are we going to be able to even see out of our condos? What are the parking accommodations? Will sidewalks and curbs be installed? And will the only access be East Street? And will they be allowed to rent them to second parties? That is a whole other problem. I think I've used my 3 minutes probably, but those are my concerns. And I know my neighbor wrote a letter as well. I don't know if there are others, but Shirley did. So I'm kind of representing her because she's out of town. So these are my concerns. I know I'm in a condo. I love it. But having separate buildings and that many concerns me terribly.
Thank you very much. Dan?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, besides Ms. Eckert's letter, we did receive a second one from Shirley Keeler, and I'll read that to introduce that into public records. This was dated October 28, 2024. Again, proposed more as a question, but my questions to the Planning Commission: how can the infrastructure of East Street and North Street handle the additional traffic? 32 condos times 2 equals 64 additional cars daily. 2, water/sewer. 3, construction equipment destroy our, what's going on here? Not sure what it is. There we go. Gremlins. Number 3, construction equipment destroy our surface streets. Please do not use East North Street if project is approved. Ecosystem of pond and green space. Number 5, any green space for the development. Number 6, structure makeup. A, subsection A, basements. Subsection B, how many levels. Subsection C, how many condos per building. Subsection D, garages/carports. 7, wildlife, both in the water and on the land. 8, city right-of-ways. 9, only one-way in and out. Is this a concern for emergency vehicles/snow removal and traffic flow? 10, are these being developed for Woodlawn Meadows or for individual developer? Woodlawn Meadows is owned by Stony Point. Apologies on the spelling. The plans are drawn up by Space Source Inc. Again, questions submitted by Shirley Keeler, 317 East North Street, Hastings, Michigan, signed by Shirley Keeler. She'd like these questions answered in writing. Thank you. Introduced in the public record.
Okay, thank you, Dan. All right, do we have any other questions from the public? If not, we'll then turn it over to our applicant to explain anything that you feel needs additional explanation, and particularly answer any of the questions that have been raised that you feel are pertinent. And then we'll open it up to questions from the commission.
Thank you. My name is John Mayle. I am with Excel Engineering. I'm representing the applicant here tonight. I think the main use of this is it gets a little, the word site condominium is a little confusing to some. It's really they're single family homes basically is what they are. So I'm not speaking for the builder, but I'm assuming that there is going to be some variation to these. They probably will have basements as long as they are allowed, or that works with the surrounding area. They probably will. Some probably will be 1 and 2 story. I don't know his exact plans, but there will be front yards and backyards, so they're not going to take up that whole space. The biggest, I guess, concern or discussion point that I kind of wanted to talk, and we've already had a little bit of discussion about the street width. The existing road out there right now, it's not curved. It's got what they call blacktop valley gutter. on either side. It's 26 foot wide, and that's what we extended our roads as. So I'm struggling to figure out, all right, are we going to have a section of 26 and then go wider with curb? Are we going to have to redo that whole section of road? And that might negatively impact whether we can, we can make some of this project work from a dollar standpoint. So that's some of my concern. I know that, I live in Kent County. All our residential streets are 30. So every community is a little different. So, we would certainly be willing to consider, raising them to 28 if that's a possibility. But we really don't want to. Rather not go to 36 because that's what the existing isn't there right now. Other than that, the rest of the reports are I think adequately explained what we're trying to do. So I guess I'm open here for any other questions that you guys might have as we discuss this.
Okay. Questions? I guess it makes sense to point out that this is another situation where we have an approved project out there that they're asking to modify. And I think it does have some bearing as to how does this compare to, if this were not approved, what would we see out there if in fact they went back to the original proposal, which would be a total of 116 units versus the 32 that are proposed. So certainly we're seeing fewer residents, probably fewer automobiles than what we might well have had they gone ahead and put in the larger buildings with 116 potential units in it. I have personally mixed feelings about the street issue because I think it's a legitimate point that what good does it do to put wider streets into the new section when we allowed narrower streets in the front section, which is the connector section to other streets in the neighborhood. So, questions?
As there's additional development around this area in the future, be it next year or 50 years from now, how firmly is having this a sort of secluded private road, is that a part of the overall long-term intention for this, or is there potential for these roads to be extended and connected to other developments? Do you know what the long-range idea for this is?
Just because this was already developed as a PUD and kind of, it's a little bit of a unique animal, really, because you've got a private road coming in. There's kind of that North Ridge Estates to the north has got kind of a cul-de-sac, but obviously that hasn't really been
all that area is
designed
still open, right?
So, and I know to the south, it's really, I know there was talk about connectivity in the last meeting. There wasn't, I wasn't here for that meeting, but my understanding was there wasn't a firm, I guess, push to make it connected.
Well, I mean, at this point, there's nothing to connect it to, right?
Correct.
There's nothing else around that. But if a developer came and was building adjacent to it, would it make sense for us to say, hey, try to connect to this road, or would it make more, or is your, the applicant's position, you may not be able to speak to this in your capacity, that it's intended to be more secluded and that's part of the neighborhood's character as it would be?
I don't know that that's necessarily you know, if the city really has a desire to connect something to the south, I mean, we're right up to the property anyway.
Sure.
So instead of having a cul-de-sac, it probably gives us some more usable land. So I don't know that they would be opposed to that. It's just, if these are gonna be private roads, and then we got public roads next to it, or those are gonna be private, so there's just,
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to have a public road, public, where people are going
Correct.
through, but I don't know, I didn't know how married the applicant was to the concept of a private road long-term, or if it was just ease of getting
I
this
think
project
just because
done
what
in
was
this
there,
situation.
what was there, and we were just kind of extending off of that is
Sure,
why
okay.
we
That's
stayed
just
with the
good
private.
information for us to have.
Other questions?
With the narrow roads, has the developer said anything about parking on site? Will they have garages, driveways?
Every unit will have they'll have garages, they'll have driveways. So, obviously, there probably will be some off and on-street parking. That's usually the case in most of these neighborhoods, depending on events. With it being, at least the way it's now, being secluded, you know, it's not gonna be a lot of traffic trying to maneuver. So even if it is, I guess in my opinion, a one-way section, I don't think it's really a danger to them. Safety.
Dave?
Well, the only comment I have, this street's a problem for me, you know, I don't, it's private, it's gonna be a private road. You know, working at the street department for years, we were never even allowed to go down that street to plow it or anything. That was done by private contractors. If I don't have a problem with the street being 28 foot. You know, the issue I always have is one of the reasons that the street is so bad on North Street is when they went up through there and did the blacktop, we didn't hold them to our standard. That's why the road's breaking up, other than you got a lot of traffic up there. But if we approve this to go forward, I'd like to see that at least the street surface be up to city standards. So if somewhere down the road we end up taking it over, I don't want it falling apart on us, you know, and costing a lot of money. I never cared for at the first meeting we had, they talked about this blacktop rolled curb. I personally would rather see them use a cement rolled curb similar to what is up in Northridge Estates. That's what they got up there. And the reason they do that is because you can change where you put your driveway. You know, if you decide you don't want to put your driveway down here and you want to put it in the middle, you don't have to do a curb cut. It's just rolled curb. The issue with the parking on that street being narrower, I don't know that I've ever seen any cars parked by Woodland Meadows because they have a parking lot back in there. I think, and you know, maybe this is kind of getting in the weeds here, I would rather see the front of the house set back a little farther so it guarantees parking in the driveway instead of on the street. My big concern is with a narrower street is, and I'd like to see a report, I asked this when it was originally brought up about the cul-de-sacs. If it's a standard cul-de-sac where a fire truck can get in and out of there, and they said at that time it was, I'd like to see the fire chief weigh in on this, on the road design at least. As far as, you know, 32 condos, if they're going to be single-family homes, I don't have a problem with it because we do have this issue. You know, one of our main goals as a city is to find housing for all our residents, and I think this, you add another 32, that's one more chip in that we're trying to do. So, other than that,
And it's 32 single-family
Right.
detached as opposed to apartments,
Right,
which, you know,
right,
it
right,
just broadens the
right.
alternatives that we're providing in the community.
you know, when this is all done, it's gonna, you know, they're gonna have to extend the water mains, you're gonna have to extend the sewer mains, and I'm assuming down the road, it's gonna be done to our standards, and we'll have responsibility for maintaining the water and the sewer, and And we got some big equipment that's got to get in there if we have rotted sewer or whatever, so. I think the road ought to be to the city standard, not necessarily 36 feet wide. 28 feet should be enough. We should allow them to go with rolled cement curb. And I would like to see the fire chief look at it, so. Other than like that, it looks, on paper, it looks like a fairly good layout, but.
The cross-section of the road will meet city standards.
Right.
As far as the blacktop, the gravel, sand. All of the utilities will be public sewer and water, kind of an extension of the city's mains that go to the end of the drive right now. So we'll be working with the DPW to get all that blessed and approved.
Okay, Dave had a couple of items there. I'd just like to make sure we've got consensus on that before we get to a final motion. So how do we feel about allowing the 28-foot width in the streets?
With a concrete gutter?
That was my second question, but yes, and we can take those two together. So if you want 28 feet width with, rolled concrete gutter.
The rolled concrete gutter is different than what we have in the rest of the city, though?
Well, if you go up and look at Northridge Estates, that's rolled
We've
curb.
approved it in some spots.
Some other spots.
Right. It's a newer alternative to traditional curbing, but
Is that something the planning commission usually
No.
specify, the kind of gutter?
No, but I think it's certainly, so the way your site condo provision reads is that private streets shall be subject to compliance with the city's public street construction standards. And that's how that reads. So really, the city has the ability to say, here is what we will accept for your road. So technically, the city commission is going to be in the position to say that. But to that end, I think that if the planning commission is saying, we actually have some opinions about that, yours is a recommendation anyway.
Right.
But I would guess that the city commission would appreciate having that thought put into it and provided to them, indicating width and gutter type and fire department, and here are our thoughts on that. But ultimately, it's not a zoning ordinance standard. It is a city street ordinance standard, and the city can vary it as they see fit.
See, that was another point I wanted to make. We have numerous PUDs around town, and I don't remember ever requiring something to do with the road. We have, the apartments out here, what is that they're building right now? Meadowstone.
So-
You got Meadowstone out there. We've never told them what their road could be back in there.
Well, that's because, so a planned unit development really is just the, sort of the planning mechanism, right?
Right, but they're modifying it.
Well, it's the legal structure under which a city kind of gets its review power, and then it allows the applicant to do sort of master planning rather than individual piecemeal, and allows mixed uses, and so it's got all of these moving pieces to it that allows for more creativity and flexibility within the zoning ordinance. However, with that said, just like the original approval, this was all originally approved to be supportive care buildings and sort of versions of multifamily use, right? They've changed it, and the first phase was done that way, but now they've gone in and said, yeah, we don't want to do any of that. We actually are just looking at single-family homes. And for all intents and purposes, this is a plat. Well, when you're doing a site condo or a plat with that kind of development, the only way those are being created as lawful building sites is under your ordinance. They have to have frontage on a private or a public road. A assisted care facility or a multifamily development, they're developed as a single piece, and the only road network in there are essentially, drive aisles,
Yep.
right?
Driveway.
Project roads, if you
Yep.
call them. They're not public or private roads, they're just development roads. And so, yeah, if you got an apartment project in front of you, you would be looking at, they kind of go through parking lots and they connect buildings, right? But they're really just 20-foot wide drive aisles. When you're looking at a plat or a site condo, it's not really the PUD element of it, it's the fact that they are creating individual building sites and they are required to have road frontage. So in that respect, then you are overseeing the design and the layout of the proposed road, whether it's public or private.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Other questions?
So the road width, though, the ordinance references the planning commission making a modification, correct?
The zoning ordinance does not. Are you saying that your city ordinance does?
Yes, I think it's for subdivisions, actually. It's Chapter 46.
I guess I just want to, I want to make sure that we're addressing the things that we're tasked with addressing, but I don't want to micromanage the details of the engineered parts. I don't feel like we're really a good source of information for that.
So
See-
we still have to modify the setback and all that, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now setbacks and lot sizes, that is you have specific zoning ordinance authority. I think your discussion on the road, so road layout is your purview. And so the idea is that you guys have said, connections to adjacent properties, fire department review for dead ends, all of that's, on point. As relates to all ordinance says on the construction is that it's subject to city standards. Obviously, then the city, working with the DPW, can accept whatever they want.
Sure.
So I think those are accurate statements. I personally think that a planning commission, you guys, I think this is a legitimate conversation. And although I don't consider it micromanaging, I think you guys have taken into consideration a couple of factors that you think are relevant. And I certainly think that's legitimate to pass those along to the city commission. That's not really, I don't think they should, I don't think they can say, well, that's not really any of your business. It's like, well, all of it's just a recommendation, right? And we had some thoughts on this. I think that's fair.
So I think the other big issue that we need to address are the setback requirements and lot sizes. Any thoughts?
I think I agree with Dave that, we should have enough room in front to park cars, to have a driveway. And moving it from 30 back to 25, I'd rather see it stay at 30, at least for the front.
Other thoughts? Sarah? You can't sigh like that and not follow it up with something, I'm sorry.
Oh. Well, it's just gonna give them a smaller rear yard, which could potentially be up against future development, so. Seems like 25 feet should be adequate space to park your car in the driveway.
Well, yeah, 25 is certainly adequate to park one car. Going to 30 doesn't get a second car in
No.
there. So,
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
I could see an issue with sites 16 through 26, because they're narrow on that,
Right.
you know. You like to have them have a little bit of a backyard.
Yeah. I think, if these are going to appeal at all to families, the ability to have a usable backyard is a factor. If in fact these are two-car families, even if they only put a one-car garage, they've got a one-car garage plus room for a second one on the driveway.
I think in general, these are gonna be smaller homes. You know, I don't see three stall garages. But most of them will probably have two. Is my assumption. I'm speaking for the applicant, obviously, but.
One to fill with junk and one to put a car in, right?
You know, I think the setbacks that we requested just gives us some flexibilities with some of these smaller lots.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a deal breaker on any of them. We would like to, I would like to keep the widths, because that starts to affect
Number of units.
the number of units. The front and back, some of these are certainly deep. But, it's not gonna be a big hardship change, but we're just asking for the flexibility.
I'm comfortable with the setbacks as proposed.
Okay. Scott?
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Levi?
I'd like to see 30. 25 feet, a lot of vehicles are going to be sitting in the sidewalks. You're going to have bumpers and tailgates sticking into the sidewalk every time you try to walk through that neighborhood.
Actually, it'll be 25 feet from the sidewalk.
Yeah, I mean, my truck's 25 feet long, it'd be sticking
Well, just
halfway, it'd be sticking halfway
Park
across
out
the-
there.
It'd be sticking halfway across the sidewalk real easy.
Bill?
I'd prefer the 30, but, 5 feet isn't a lot, but my pickup truck also would be out towards the sidewalk
Yeah.
then, yeah.
Dave?
I agree with Sarah. I don't have any problems with the setback. Even if it's 30 feet, if you have 2 or 3 people come over, now they're on the sidewalk anyhow.
Right.
And I think like on North Street, I think they're required to park in the garage. You don't park outside. And I don't know if this project, and this has nothing to do with it, but this project's probably going to be, some company's going to manage that property up there, and if it's an association like we have at all the other condos, they're going to tell them where to park, But, like I said, I don't have any problem with the setbacks that are proposed.
Okay, so I think the majority favored staying with the requested 25. All right, are we ready to proceed? We've addressed the street issue, we've addressed the road construction standard, we've discussed the fire department review, we've discussed the lot size and setback requirements. Rebecca, are you keeping track of what we're doing that we're supposed to be doing versus what we've not yet addressed?
I am.
Are you? Have we addressed everything we need to address?
Yes, in terms of that which required a decision, if you will,
Right.
or a finding, all of the bolded items should be as part of the motion, but your scribe knows what needs to be included in that.
Scripted.
Yeah. Okay, so with that explanation, do we have a motion? I won't make you state what you're moving, as Rebecca said, the scribe has got that down, and if
I
she-
would say it should be two separate motions.
Okay,
One would be a recommendation to approve the final development plan of the PUD,
okay,
subject to those conditions that you listed with respect to lot size, lot width, those bolded items.
yep,
And based on your findings of the PUD criteria would be one motion, and the second would be a recommendation to approve the proposed site condominium based upon a finding, and then it was your...
let's not, don't confuse me.
Got it.
Let's stick with the first one
Okay.
while that's fresh in our minds.
I'll make the motion to recommend the approval of the PUD subject to those items that were mentioned with the setbacks and whatnot.
Okay,
I'll support that.
moved and supported. Is there further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same.
I
Oh.
missed who moved and supported. I was trying to figure out how
Uh,
to write this at the time.
Nicole supported it, and Dave
Thank you.
Moved it. Okay, Rebecca, now you can tell me what I need to do for the second one.
All right, it would be a recommendation to approve the preliminary plan for the site condominium project, and it would be based upon a finding of compliance with 9735 and subject to the following. And it would be your conclusions on those 4 bullet points with respect to the road and the infrastructure and the master deed and the PUD approval.
Okay. Do we have a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion. Do I have to read it?
No.
Okay.
Do we have support?
I'll support.
Moved and supported. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Okay, thank you. Mrs. Eckert, we appreciate you being here tonight. We appreciate Mrs. Keeler also providing us with some input. Hopefully this is a project that will ultimately enhance the neighborhood and the community. Just remember what the alternative might have been had we not made these modifications. All right, we have no new business. JPA, JPC update.
The JPC met very briefly and didn't really cover much.
And the JPA, once again,
Oh, I
failed to
said
have
that
a quorum.
backwards.
You said it backwards. The JPA met, and...
Yes, and did not cover much. The JPC did not have a quorum.
And so the JPC is actually holding 3 meetings at their next scheduled meeting time so that we can comply with the...
So you can take a break in between them meetings? You gotta have 3 at the same night, right?
Yeah, about 30 seconds.
Okay. Just being a little smart.
Yeah, well, the fact that we're having to hold 3 in one night is kind of a statement in and of
Yeah.
itself.
Lost train of thought, didn't you?
No, I'm just waiting for Dan's attention because it's his item. General work task list, anything you want to point out to us?
Really nothing to point out. For the members of the Housing Committee, I will be sending out a poll this week so we can reconvene that committee sometime later this month, prior to Thanksgiving.
You hope. All right, any questions for Dan on the work task list? Tracking report?
Yes, I mentioned last month that I was going to provide an update for the site plan tracker that we did meet, I don't believe, in September and October. We had some other duties that we were attending to. So just wanted for your information, the original Meadowstone mobile home complex that was approved February 3rd of 2020, that has been removed from the site plan tracking report. All conditions have been met. Certificate of occupancies have been issued. Serenity Village, which was approved 11/7/22, has also been removed from the report since they will not be constructing on the site that was subject to site plan approval. Tide Loss, which was approved 12/5/22, has been removed because that development has been completed and the occupancy report or occupancy permits have been issued. Chris Nelson, which is the towing service on South Hanover, that was approved January 2nd, 24. Those conditions have been met, so that has been removed. Rusty Bible on the property on South Hanover, behind the N6 towing, that was approved March 4th of 24. Mr. Bible decided not to move forward with that project and purchase property outside of town. So those following ones have been deleted from the list. So the list you have now is current, subject to change, pending the actions.
Okay, any questions for Dan? All right, thank you very much. Open public discussion and comment. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Staff comments? Commissioner comments? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Support?
Support.
Moved and supported. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Good meeting.